Hey everybody, we're about to have a conversation with one of my favorite people and favorite activists, Ellie Krug. Ellie is the author of two books. One is Getting to Ellen, and her new book is Being Ellen. Being Ellen is about living as a trans person in America. Ellie is also on the radio on AM 950. She is the host of the trans-focused radio show, Illegal Woman. Hey Ellie, how you doing?
I'm good, Jerome. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I've got just the right amount of caffeine going on today. The mug today says "for Fox's sake," which I think is appropriate given everything that's going on in the world. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with us today.
Thank you for having me back. I love your podcast. I love you, and I'm just grateful for you to give me some time.
Oh, well, those vibes are reciprocated 100%. So you said, thanks for having me back. For people who are just tuning in for the first time, Ellie was on the television show Bottomless Coffee with Jerome, one of our best guests. And we chatted about Ellie's book, Getting to Ellen, which and this is from memory, Ellie, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But it was kind of your autobiography, up to that point where you transitioned in your 50s, I think, from kind of a bro-y corporate attorney or civil litigator, maybe?
Civil trial lawyer representing railroads and trucking companies.
Yeah.
I couldn't make this up if I wanted to.
But also, I think as part of that, you found your way into activism as well. And I feel like that's where we intersected at the time. But now you've written another book, and it's called Being Ellen. And I'm so happy that you're here to talk about it today. Tell us about it.
Well, thanks. So Getting to Ellen was my coming out story. Okay. And that book was published in early 2013. Being Ellen is so you have a lot of transgender writers who write their coming out story, and that's what they do, and that's the only book they write. Being Ellen is what all transpired from when I transitioned genders up to the end of 2022 when I was elected to school board at my local school district here in Carver County, Minnesota, which is about 40 miles west of the Twin Cities. So the second book is like, what's it like to finally get to live as you, a woman?
Yeah.
Okay. Albeit with this horribly masculine voice, but nonetheless, what did you do? How is it so different? All of that stuff. Now, there aren't as many books like that by trans writers.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get that book out.
Oh, thank you for doing that. You're absolutely right. I'm in my mind, I'm trying to think through the stories, like the trans stories that I've read or watched. And I feel like it's through movies more so than books. And none are really hitting as close to home as I think your book will. So that's really exciting. And I think I saw on your website that maybe you do like book clubs as well.
I do. If you live in the Twin Cities and you read either of my books, I will come to your book club. And if you live outside the Twin Cities, we can do that virtually. But I do. I do that pro bono. And I mean, it's just my way of thanking readers for allowing my words to occupy a part of their brain for a part of the time.
Are there any surprises in the book?
Well, yeah. I mean, I write about having sex for the first time as a woman.
Oh, okay. Oh. Deeply personal.
And I mean, I do write about, because I date both men and women.
Oh, okay.
But primarily men. And, and I write how, as when I still presented as a man, you would hear these things about women complaining about how men were towards them. Sorry, Jerome.
It's okay.
I'm trying to catch the male part of this humanity here. But when I presented as a man and I would hear those things, I like, certainly I would sympathize. Okay, but I really didn't have a basis to fully and totally understand. But once I transitioned, it's a way different world. Not only as it relates to romantic or sexual relationships, but way different just about how women are, me being able finally to observe and fully understand how men treat women. And, now there are a lot of men that are just absolutely wonderful for women, wonderful allies, all of that stuff. But there are also still a lot of men who are caught up in, their masculinity, this competitive nature that a lot of men seem to have. Now, women are also competitive. I mean, I don't want to draw with too big of a brush, but the book also talks about just learning the ropes. Like, I did go through speech therapy to learn how a woman, spoke. I mean, obviously the voice pitch isn't there, but there are certain things that I've incorporated about how women speak. Learn how that women will use exclamation marks when they do their emails. Okay, exclamation, exclamation, exclamation.
Oh, interesting.
Something that I certainly didn't understand when I identified, when I was presenting as a man. But I tell women about that, and they're like, "Yeah, I do that." Why? Exclamation mark.
There's just no reason. Everyone's just been doing it for a long time, I guess. Is that what it comes down to?
I mean, my theory, of course, I'm not an anthropologist, is that I think women are socialized into wanting to be liked and accepted. Men, they'll write a statement, have a good, at the end of an email, have a good day, period. Okay. All right. And their name's down below.
Yeah.
A woman, if she saw another woman type it out, have a good day, period, the immediate reaction that the reader would have is that woman mad at me? Did I do something to upset her? And so have a good day, exclamation mark, is like, hey, I like you, we're all good, kind of thing. And I think that women have, they use exclamation marks to make their point stronger, because a lot of readers, even women readers, will put more emphasis on what a man has to say than what a woman has to say. So at any rate, I mean, these were things that I was oblivious to when I presented still as a dude.
Yeah.
And, there are other secrets. Now, I've got to tell you, there's some things that started out in the book.
Okay. Okay.
Which did not make it to the end of the book.
Well, do you want to tell us about some of the things that ended up on the cutting room floor?
Well, no, not really, because I'm going to run for school board again. And
you are? Okay.
I don't need the legs and things out there.
That was probably a judicious decision. But who knows? Maybe in book 3. Who's to say?
Book 3 is, I mean, there is going to be a third book, hopefully titled, first book is Getting to Ellen. Second book is Being Ellen. Third book be Saying Goodbye to Ellen. And it'll be, but I am so worn out from writing second book. I have not even started doing any writing for book 3. So we'll see if that happens.
Well, what's a podcast without some technical issues, huh? Luckily, I'm editing, so we can figure out where we went off track. Do you recall what we were talking about?
We were actually talking about the third book and what was on the cutting room floor, and that it all started after we started laughing about, to be certain I'm going to include those things on the cutting room floor.
No more humor in this podcast.
We're in trouble now.
As I think I was also asking, where in your two books your political journey is most reflected. If it's in Getting to Ellen or Being Ellen, because you had mentioned the school
Yeah, no,
board.
certainly in the second book, and so uh, as I explained fairly early in the second book, and I think you and I have talked about before, I'm a student of Dr. King and Robert F. Kennedy
Yes.
Sr., not Jr. Um, I was 11 years old when they were murdered. And I had been a
Mm,
very, I was a pretty precocious kid. I mean, I was reading the newspaper when I was 7 years old. And back in the mid 60s, I mean, they were on the TV all the time. They were in the newspapers, they were in Life magazine, all of that stuff. And all of that sank into me about the need, the obligation that we have to make the world a better place. I mean, both of them talked about it,
yes.
both of them tried to instill it in others. And then certainly they led by example. And so after they
Yes.
went, I mean, I wanted to be a lawyer because Bobby Kennedy was. And I wanted to go out and be an environmental lawyer to save the environment. I also went through the first Earth Day. I am that old, okay? And,
Okay.
um,
Gaylord.
but what happened was I got sidetracked by money, and then I got sidetracked because I married my high school sweetheart. I loved her with all my heart. And I tried to stay, presenting as a man because I just knew that my whole, her world would be destroyed. The lives of my two children would
Sure.
be destroyed. And so at any rate, once I transitioned, I decided not to be a civil trial lawyer anymore, representing railroads and trucking companies, two of the most, at that time, most anti-LGBTQ organizations you could think of. And I just decided that I really wanted to go out and finally fulfill the charge that I had from Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy. So when I moved to the Twin Cities, and that's where the book picks up. The book picks up with me, the year that I moved to the Twin Cities, and that was where I came up. I decided I was going to, knowing nothing about how the world
Yeah.
worked, that I was going to be the executive director of a nonprofit. Now, in retrospect, it was
Okay.
incredibly naive because most nonprofit executive directors have years, decades of experience working their way up through the nonprofit world before they get to be an ED. But not Ellie Krug. I'm like, I'm just going to go do it. And you know what? I did it.
There you
I got
go. There you
hired to
go.
run a legal access nonprofit that helped low income people navigate to find pro bono lawyers. And then along that way, I'd also started speaking publicly. And my work as a public speaker around human inclusivity, around, this was when DEI was actually a wonderful phrase. In my
Right.
book, it still is a wonderful phrase. It's just politically, persona.
Yeah, I find that very strange, and I do think we need to talk about kind of these national trends that are going on. But before we get to that, it's so funny that you bring being an executive director, because I am now the executive director of a nonprofit here in the Twin
Oh,
Cities. It's called One
congratulations.
Voice Mixed Chorus.
Oh,
Thank you very
yes.
much.
I That's a
Yeah,
wonderful nonprofit. They put on wonderful, wonderful shows. Of course.
they're great, and their community is really lovely as well. And it's um, this conversation is one in particular that I'm excited to share with them, because our course is about 10%
Yep.
trans, give or take. Um, Certainly a number of gender nonconforming, certainly a number of just questioning, as well as just cis people. But it's so inclusive and so welcoming. But I suspect, I might be projecting, but I suspect that a lot of people who are welcoming and inclusive of the trans community still don't walk in the same shoes of trans people, and don't know everything that trans people are going through. And so I feel like this book
Mm.
would be a really great way to bring people together in the One Voice community, and
Well,
others.
as it turns out, Jerome, I actually worked with that board um,
Oh, no way.
probably a decade ago. They brought me in. They wanted to do. I did a workshop around inclusivity, and I helped facilitate some conversations for the board at a retreat. So I'm well familiar with them, and congratulations on becoming the ED. It's a wonderful nonprofit. So very lucky to have you, and I'm thrilled for you and for your organization, for the board.
Oh, thank you. And now this is a business meeting. Now that I know you've already got a relationship with One Voice, we'll have to find a way to get you
No,
to
I'd
come
love to.
back.
I'd love to.
Yeah, that'll
Yeah.
be really, really fun. But I know exactly what you mean when you say that you became an ED and then you're like, okay, well, now I have to figure out what
Oh,
the
right.
job is.
Yeah. I got lucky because the nonprofit Call for Justice just existed on paper. Uh, they had a half a
Oh,
million dollars in the bank, but they didn't have somebody to lead it. And of course,
yeah,
I'm interviewing with them, and I'm like, look, this doesn't work with the voice and all that stuff. And I'm like, Ellie, you're just being so naive to think that they would hire you, a stranger. I mean, I hadn't lived in the Twin Cities very long. I didn't know the legal community, the nonprofit legal community. And I
sure.
thought, oh, why are you doing this? But to their credit, a bunch of straight white people hired me. And in part, being not from the Twin Cities was a plus for them because they didn't want somebody who was
Yeah.
beholden to other interests within the legal community. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm not beholden.
Yes.
As it turned out, I wasn't very beholden to the board either. They didn't like that.
Oh, I bet not.
but
I think,
that's because things weren't working and they wanted it to go a certain way, and I'm like, this ain't going to work,
yeah,
so let's go this way. And then
yeah.
I had other board members like, Ellie, we love you go that way and we'll deal with all the fallout and all that stuff. So
Okay. Oh, fun. What a fun intersection.
yeah,
That's great. That's great. I'm hoping, well, I'm not hoping, I'm thinking that because I'm now old enough to have lived through one uh, Trump administration and to have
yeah,
seen the energy that builds up under all that oppression. I am hoping that we just see a real uh, surgence of trans people and allies, and I would say mission aligned people run for office, not run for, but apply to be executive directors with, you know, little to no experience, but lots of capability. I'm excited to see people kind of realize that if they want the world to change, that they have to be the ones to change it. It's not a passive activity. It won't just happen to you. You kind of have to get out there and you have to make the difference yourself. And so I think you've done that. And I think you're continuing to do that in your activism and in your work. And I am excited for this book and this conversation to inspire other people. But in addition to those two things, you're also on AM 950. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your radio show?
so I've been in the radio business for about 10 years. It all started when Betty Folliard, who is a wonderful female feminist activist in her own right, asked me to be on her show. She wanted to talk about my first book, and God love Betty.
Hmm.
She did all the homework. She read the book. She had great questions, and I had done radio when I was in college, back at Co-College COE in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I had the Friday afternoon going home show, which was actually a great time slot. And But the bug never left me. So we got done with that interview with Betty, and I just off the top of my head said, "Hey, do you think the station be interested in having a trans radio host?"
Hmm.
And she said, "I don't know, but I'll check." 2 weeks later, I'm sitting with the owner of AM 950, Chad Larson, a wonderful man, and he's like, "We want you. We want you." And so that started me down the road of I'm now on my third iteration of my show. The first show was called Hidden Edges, which was about surviving the human condition. I had people on who had gone through these great life crises who came out on the other end, or who had gone and done really incredible things in their lives to help other people. The second show was Ellie 2.0 Radio, which that lasted more than 350 episodes. That was about
Oh my
idealism and
gosh.
idealists. So I brought other people in who are trying to change the world. But when Donald Trump got reelected, it became very clear to me that I needed to really focus my energies and my activism on protecting trans and non-binary people, gender expansive humans.
Mm.
So Donald Trump got elected on a Tuesday. On that Friday, when I usually tape my show, which airs on Saturday, on that Friday, I went into the station, talked to Chad Larson, and said, I need to change the format. And I'm thinking about using the name The Illegal Trans Woman. What do you think? And he was like, I love it. And so
Yeah.
that Friday was the last Ellie 2.0 radio show. And the next Friday, I taped, it airs on Saturday. The next weekend was the first show, The Illegal Trans Woman. And that is now,
Tell us about the illegal trans woman. That's a
oh,
great name.
well,
Good. Yeah.
it takes its name from Project 2025, which,
Okay.
you know, I mean, targets transgender people. Like, I mean, they start talking about trans people on either the first or second page of this 900-page document and keep talking about us.
Yeah.
And they want to, it's very clear from that document that they want to make people who are transgender, they want to erase them from society. Okay. They want to make them illegal. And so that's where the name comes from. And what the show has done is I've brought in, you know, people, trans folks who had been elected to office. I've brought in nonprofit folks, activists, journalists. I brought in folks who are reporting on things relating to the trans community, relating to issues around sports, around education, all of those things. Legal issues where, the Supreme Court came down with a decision last year as it related to the Scarametti case, as it related to gender affirming care out of Tennessee. I had legal people come in and speak about that. We're going to have a couple of trans athletes cases that are going to be decided by the end of July, end of June. And so
Mm.
I'm already working to have the lawyers come back for that. And so it's full-throated advocacy on behalf of the trans community. As far as I can
It's wonderful.
tell, there's not another radio/podcast, because it goes into podcast after we're done. There's not another radio/podcast show like mine anywhere in the country. Now, KFAI has a trans, they have, which is a local station in Minneapolis.
Hmm.
I mean, they have trans um, hosts, and there are other trans hosts out there, and various. I'm going to have one actually on my show this weekend out of Ohio, Lee Wade. But in terms of a week in, week out, this is the advocacy that you're doing. Radio show,
Yeah.
like going live over the air and then going to podcast. I think I may be the only one. If I'm not the only one, there aren't many of us. So
That's such a great resource that you're creating for people to help understand what's happening in the community. Um, and where my head is going is that so many of us are kind of beholden to the algorithms in our lives that like decide what we see and what we hear. And I'm as I'm going through all the stuff I was scrolling through today, I'm shocked by how little had to relate to the trans experience, knowing how much is happening to the trans community. And um, it's certainly likely here from what you're saying that so much of that is because there's not as much content being created about the experience, um, and like not enough to break through this algorithm, aside from the fact that the algorithm is probably suppressing your voices anyway.
well, I mean, part of it. There are just so many people or things competing for attention. My show is
Yeah.
this little speck. It would be wonderful if somehow it would get some national recognition and, it would take off. I'm always hoping that would happen, but the odds are probably not. But the value of it is, I mean, my voice is, it's a problem generally, okay, but my listeners seem to understand that. And then I'm in a good position, like when we talk about gender affirming care for trans kids and trans youth, to explain to them why it's so important that trans girls not go through puberty so that they can avoid acquiring this voice. Because this voice, is difficult as it relates to social interactions. I get people, they give me this look all the time because they didn't expect the voice coming out of this body, and it's hard to date because there are people like, oh, this, I'm not going to, no, I've had some dates, so I'm not.
Yes, you mentioned it.
So, but Jerome, if I could, this is, I refer to myself as a hack on the radio, all right, because
Okay.
it's one of many different things I do. But if somebody came to me and said, if you put in 30 hours a week on this show and you elevated it to X or Y level, and you will then have a national platform, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do that because it's very important for my community that they have somebody that's out there nationally speaking for them, that particularly in the trans community, with a trans woman who doesn't pass. The passing is the extent to which no one would ever guess that you were assigned a different gender at birth. Of course, it has its origins from Jim Crow, where light-skinned African Americans could pass for white and escape Jim Crow. And so there aren't very many trans, advocates, leaders who get national recognition who don't pass. And the reason for that is because if you pass, it's not any work on the behalf of the listener or the ally. But if you don't pass, it's like, I got to get used to this. Okay. And guess what? Yeah, you got to get used to it. But then once you get used to it, you realize I'm just like everybody else.
And that's where I am. It's so you mentioned your voice on the TV show. You've mentioned it a couple of times in this conversation. And my immediate instinct is to be like, I'm not worried about your voice because I'm really not. But that discounts your experience when you share with me. You're like, no, Jerome, listen, I have this voice. I'm talking to people all the time. This is how people are reacting to this voice. And it makes me think about like, I guess, like, sure, I must be more inclusive in relation to so much more of the population than I thought. And I feel like everyone just kind of thinks of themselves as just like, just regular dude hanging out, chatting with Ellie on podcasts.
They're in Being Ellen, there's a vignette about a man who's literally stands me up in the middle of a date. Literally, like he doesn't come back. And that's after, and Jerome, that was after me verifying multiple times that he was okay with my voice. Okay. And then he stood me up and then he sent me a message and said, your voice is a problem. And I'm like, dude,
okay.
Now this is, again, as we talked earlier, on this podcast about how I didn't understand some of the things that women went through when I presented as a man. Okay. Now I finally understood it. You lied to me, dude.
right. I was about to say, I've been in my relationship with Aaron for gotta be 11, 12 years now. But my single friends talk about what it's like to date right now. And I'm like, whoa. It really makes you overlook a lot of your partner's problems.
Yeah. Although, as it turns out, Ellie Krug, is a pretty picky woman.
Okay.
So even though you may like me a lot, okay, if you don't fit certain things that I need in this world, I'm sorry, we can just be friends, but that's it.
It's got to go both ways. Oh, that's funny. I do want to, where are we? Okay. We have a little bit of time, and I do want to talk about the national landscape. Because you are bringing people onto a legal trans woman who are giving you a lot of information about what's happening. But even just before this conversation, you were telling me about just like breaking news that's going on. And so I think it would really hit home if we could talk about um, some of the actions that state
Yep.
and federal governments are taking now against, I would say, our community, but especially your community, um, and just like the impact that's having or will have on individuals.
So, it was very clear in the first Trump administration that they were gunning for, trans people. I mean, they tried to dismiss all the transgender service members in Trump one.
Mm-hmm.
They started to, they issued the Department of Health and Human Services issued a directive telling doctors and nurses that they could choose not to treat transgender people. That would be all right if they chose not to do that.
Wow.
But of course,
Which is
I know.
crazy. I mean, I don't want to say that after everything that you say, but both of those things are
Okay,
crazy.
but
Go ahead.
when Biden got elected, I breathed a sigh of relief and thought, okay, well that was close, but when the campaigning again started, and this Project 2025 came out, and I started reading it, and and you had Russell Vought, who now head of the OMB, and you got Kevin Roberts, who heads the Heritage Project, start talking about what they're going to do with transgender people. It became very clear to me this Trump too is going to be if he's elected, going to be way worse. Hence why we have the show, The Illegal Trans Woman. And what's happened, Jerome, is that they have systematically, they're doing it incrementally, but systematically they're angling to erase transgender people. And it's a in tandem with states. So we've got a couple of states where they're great experimenters on this stuff: Florida and Texas, now Kansas, just this month, also joining the bandwagon. But my old state of Iowa, last year they literally took transgender people outside the protections of the state civil rights statute. I mean, trans people had been protected. They had been just like gay people, just like people of color, people with disabilities, all that other stuff. Last year, the legislature said we're no longer going to protect transgender people legally. And so
Wow.
then you have, I mean, I don't know, we've got 27 or 28 states that ban trans kids from playing sports. We got, I don't know, we're heading towards 20 states with, bans, bathroom bans. I mean, in theory, if I use the women's restroom at the Salt Lake International Airport, I can be arrested. And in every legislative season, you have all of these bills being introduced into state houses, and more those bills are, back a decade ago, 2016, they tried to pass HB1 in North Carolina, the first bathroom bill. There was this outrage all over the country, and artists were canceling shows, all that stuff. We've got, in that 10 years, we've gone from that outrage to like, oh, it's just another state that's doing that this time. Oh, well, and so it's wearing down people, wearing down the allies.
Yeah.
And so most recently, as you and I talked before we began here, most recently, Kansas passed SB 244, which is a law banning trans people from public restrooms that align with their gender identity. Okay, creating a bounty, $1,000 bounty, that if somebody sees Ellie Krug in the women's restroom, they can report me. And the mechanism in the law isn't necessarily clear. It doesn't matter. It's about the fear. They can go collect $1,000, or I can be arrested, or I don't know exactly how it works, but okay. But most importantly, they, in that bill, SB 244, they had a provision that if you're transgender and you've had your driver's license gender marker changed to align with your gender identity, that every transgender person in Kansas who has a driver's license that aligns with their gender identity had to immediately, and this is like a letter that came out last night from the Chicago or the Kansas DMV, that every trans Kansan has to return that driver's license immediately. It's not like you got a week. It's not like, it's like today, March 26th or February 26th, you will
February.
have to
Yeah.
turn in your driver's license and get a new license. Or you can't drive. Okay. So now you're going to get arrested for driving without a driver's license. And so this is
Wow.
a full-bore attack, because gender markers are like, it's about who you are. It's about the identity that you carry. It's the legal identification. And so
Yeah.
if I had to go revert back to an M on my driver's license every time I showed it, somebody would know that something is
Yeah.
up. And it's just, it puts people at harm. It psychologically, it is a horrible thing, but it's the government controlling trans people, aiming to erase us.
It's difficult to fathom the rationale for doing it. Yeah. Again, coming from some guy with the podcast, I'm like, what is wrong with these people? Why do they not like trans people so much that they'd be willing to do this? Because it's like getting a bill passed is not a light lift for anyone.
But you have these, totally MAGA controlled legislatures where,
yeah, and I assume that they're setting this up for a challenge to work its way up through the courts, and then they anticipate getting some kind of new capacity for oppressing people when the court either doesn't strike it down or says, "Well, you can only do it if you do it this particular way."
So, Jerome, you're very astute, because by making the law effective immediately,
yeah.
there's no chance to go into court in advance to
get an injunction.
Right. And so you're like, hey, it's effective tomorrow. Too bad. You're illegal now. Okay. And so will there be legal challenges? Sure. But it's about the psychological thing. It's about,
right.
And the question is, why trans people? Why are we the ones that they are coming after all the time? And the answer is that what the Heritage Foundation wants to do, and one of the bedrocks of MAGA, of Christian nationalism, is this idea of an ordered society, where it's a patriarchy, it's a Christian nationalist society where, these quote unquote Christian, wholesome values, whatever they are, predominate. And that anybody who represents a risk to that order needs to be eliminated. So, that would be people with visible disabilities. That would be people of different skin colors. That would be certainly transgender people, because, oh my God, the idea that you can just decide in your head that we went through this battle with gay men and women that, my God, how could you decide that you're, if you're a man, that you like a man with man parts? How can you decide that? Okay? Right? We thought that. But, and this is why they're going after the trans kids, is because they believe it's not real. They believe it's just nilly-willy. And they believe that if they can keep the trans kids from transitioning, two things will happen. One is they won't, quote unquote, infect other kids, which doesn't happen. It's called social contagion.
Yeah.
The second thing is they believe that if they can keep them from transitioning, they'll grow out of it. They'll get past it. They'll become normal adults if they don't transition. And they just don't absolutely understand that this is real. By the way, read my first book, because I tried my best to choose to stay identifying as a man because of all the hurt that it was going to create. But it's real.
But your misery is just a small price to pay for, this rigid social order that benefits these white heterosexual men.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
And they don't understand, because first of all, they've
Christian
never really
men, white heterosexual Christian.
They've never really had the chance to get to know trans people, because my God, that's abhorrent.
Oh, no.
But when Dennis Dugard, who was the governor of South Dakota, had a bathroom bill on his desk, ready to sign it the next morning. He met with 3 trans people that night, had a 2-hour
Hmm.
conversation with them, and came back the next morning and said, I'm not going to sign this bill. These people are real. This is a real experience for them. I'm not going to, discriminate against them. So,
Yeah.
but the leaders of MAGA right now, they don't want to get to know trans people. They think we're an abomination, and I'm just here to report this is real. This thing about living authentically, whatever it may lead you to. Okay, I mean, we're talking about things that are legal, of course. All right, but it's real, and my saying is human authenticity will not leave you alone until you listen to it. And that's why they're so misplaced with what they're doing to our trans kids. They're harming our trans kids,
Yeah.
legions of harm.
Well, that shifts us maybe to advocacy because, like we mentioned, the world's not going to change itself, but the world is changing, and really not in the way that I'm liking,
No,
to where I'm liking what I'm
I
seeing.
agree.
And but at the same time, I'm seeing like no kings rallies. We know that half the population doesn't agree with what's going on. Um, and I'm kind of fascinated with this idea of what it takes to enact like durable political
Mhm.
change. And as you were speaking, it just occurred to me that the right is achieving political change. Like
Sure.
they have a plan. They are enacting their plan. And I'm wondering if you are aware of a plan on our side, of what we should be doing in order, to not just to counteract what's happening, but to move forward with our vision for a better, more inclusive society. Because, from my political experience in running for office, it was more like someone needs to run.
Right.
Figure it out. Figure it out. If you can run, you should run for office. Everyone, run for something. I don't care what it is. Run. I think that's a literal organization. Run for something. Um, whereas, at least on the other side, it's like, the governor of South Dakota kills puppies, but she should be secretary of Homeland of that department,
Department of Homeland
or what have you, because that, like,
Security. Yeah.
thank you, because that continues to advance her up in political circles. So I'm wondering what your take is on us creating some change on our end.
I mean, Kamala had that message about that kind of change and the direction that our country would be able to continue on. But she didn't get elected, at least as far as we can tell. She didn't get elected. Um,
Hmm.
uh, the problem with the Democratic Party is that we're too nice. We're not ruthless. In the sense of ruthlessness, I just mean, I went to one of our elected, House members for the Minnesota House, and I said to her, "What you need, the Democratic Party needs in Minnesota, is you need 4 or 5 civil trial lawyers to come in and tell you how to message sound bites that don't go any longer than 4 or 5 words." Um,
Yeah,
because that's what trial work is. Trial work is just selling an idea, and you
yeah,
distill this huge big thing down to 4 or 5 words, and you just keep pounding those words in front of the jury time and time and time again until they accept it. But
yeah,
Democrats, they don't know how to do that. They want to. They're just too nice, and they're just not willing, I think, to be mean. And by mean, I just mean, you say something even though I mean, it's true, but
yeah,
people are going to be upset about you saying it, and the Dems are like, oh, I don't want to upset anybody, and so I don't
yeah.
know. All I just know is that we're not going to have a democracy. Maybe past, I don't know, next week, because there is this rumor about him nationalizing the elections in
Sure.
November. So I think that, beyond, before we start protecting trans people, before people of color, people who are with disabilities, are undocumented people, we got to protect this democracy. We gotta make
Mm,
sure that we actually have a real election in November. We have to be sure that we actually don't have Donald Trump run for a third term as president. And I'm not convinced that. I mean, I have hope. I believe greatly in the power of the human spirit. Um, but you know, and of course Minneapolis and Minnesota in general, because what was going on in Minneapolis with ICE was also happening out
hmm
here in Carver County. And in Carver County, we mobilized just like we saw in Minneapolis. Now that stuff can give you really great, really, really great hope. We just
Yes.
have to hope that other parts of the country can be as weird as we are up here, about standing outside in our nightgowns and bathrobes and slippers, blowing a whistle, at 6 in the
Yeah.
morning at four dudes trying to beat up, a 60-year-old guy. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. I'm hearing that we need like the national equivalent of standing outside in your bathrobe on ice, but about the erosion of our democracy. Like, what is
right.
what is the equivalent of blowing the whistle when you're seeing your rights erode
Well,
away? That's what we
well,
need to
so I'm,
find.
I'm just going to tell you, we,
Oh,
we,
great.
we need a national strike. Now, when Minneapolis, when we were
Mm,
dealing with ICE, we had localized strikes, economic strikes. No one in this country is going to pay attention unless the people who make money, like the people like the
hmm
oligarchs, the billionaires, unless they know it's going to cost them money. And so
Yeah.
literally, we need to have the country come to a standstill for one day. No one goes to work. No one buys anything. No one's at Target. No one's on Amazon. No one's spending any money. We need to do that one day. And then after that, we need to do it for 2 days. That, okay, that's Ellie Krug's personal opinion. That will change everything.
I support it. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's working on that right now. I don't know if Indivisible has got people talking about organizing a general strike. For some reason, from my law school days, something is tickling me about it not being about some legal issues about organizing general strikes, but I can't recall whether or not that's true or just was an old story. Um, but I think you're absolutely right. I think the rich have gotten so rich that I think it will take more than one day to impact them. Um, I think there are some different ways you can do things too. Like if we just withdrew money from the banks, I think that would have a significant impact. I kind of think that if we bought the stock of companies that we were boycotting when they were down, some kind of
Yeah.
activist investoring, I think could be an opportunity as well. What I would love to see is like it written down in a plan, circulated amongst people like ourselves and our organizer community, so we can all be on the same page
Yeah.
about
And it
things.
has to be
Um,
circulated by leadership, the leaders that we have,
yeah,
not the smaller nonprofits where somebody's like, oh, it's just that small nonprofit, don't pay attention to them. Uh,
yeah,
but it has to be economic clout. Coupled with political clout. But the billionaires, the oligarchs, they're not worried about the political stuff because they've got they've got control of the
hmm
politicians.
hmm
So we have to go after those that have money. And I'd be happy to help be involved in leading that thing, but
yeah.
I'm just Ellie Krug, this small person with this, radio show, and on the, on the school board. So
Hey, power to the people. You know, yeah, it's once again as just a guy with the podcast, compared to the billionaires and gazillionaires, like we are all just little
yeah,
specks you know. So until we come together and really assert what it is that we want, what we want this world to look like, which frankly aligns with what a lot of them want. Like trans people in Kansas want to be able to get in their cars and go to the store and buy
Right.
stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
Not that
Yeah.
big of a
Well, and
deal.
and businesses want workers. I mean,
Yes.
the construction industry has been,
Decimated by this ice
yeah,
business here in Minneapolis, at
yeah,
least, in
yeah.
Minnesota.
I mean, and of course, it's all strategic because the vast
Hmm.
majority of undocumented folks, who I believe should be left alone. Okay, I mean, yeah, if you're a violent
Hmm.
criminal, we should get, you should get out of our country. But the vast
Yeah.
majority, you've been here 30 years, you got 3 kids born in America. My God, let's leave you
Right.
alone, and you know, let's work towards getting you, to become a citizen. But the vast
Yeah.
majority are in the southern states. And noticeably, for the most part, they're staying out. ICE is, I mean, not operate. I mean, they're not doing
Hmm.
these surges, down in Dallas or Houston or in Sarasota. They're not
Right.
doing those searches. And obviously, it's all political,
It's all political, and it's
led
very
by a
strange.
man who
Uh,
believes only in himself, only cares about himself, and who engages in retribution as a sport.
so I thought the same way, but now I think it's more of a coalition of people who are concerned about
Oh,
themselves.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Led by him, though.
And less I not mention it, I think a lot of those people's names can be found in
Yeah,
those Epstein files, where you will not find trans people in there. You will find Trump. You will find other people in that coalition listed many, many, many times. So
many names. Yep. And
let that be said on the
yeah,
record.
and when Bondi testified before, the House committee, and they asked the women to stand up, and she just refused to even look at them,
Yeah,
refused to even acknowledge them. It's just, it just go. It's just now. Will that pull him down in the end? Possibly, possibly.
possibly,
You
possibly.
know, but I don't know, Jerome. I mean,
I
it's a very, very obviously for all of us a very shaky time, and
very much so.
and then the question is, if we, if he goes away, what do we have left? Because we have a whole generation now of young men who only know how to
Mm,
behave because of Donald Trump and his acolytes. I mean, they've been watching Donald
yeah,
Trump since 2014, because he started going after Obama with the birth certificate thing. And so we're talking 12 years. You were
yeah,
10 years old, now you're 22 years old, and that's the only way you know how to behave. When I
I.
was growing up, politicians disagreed with each other and then they went out and got a drink.
Mhm.
Okay, because they're all
Yeah,
working for the common good. Now they might have had different impressions about what the common good is. We have nobody anymore talking about what the common good is. Nobody.
this back in my day.
We don't even have that.
I
That
agree with you.
phrase is not even part of the lexicon. And talk about the Democrats. Okay, now we're going to need to move on because I'm really getting going here. But even the
Well,
Democrats, they don't
I
use the phrase the
yeah,
common good. I mean, because right now with the
no,
way the country's divided between red and blue, how do you decide what is the common good? Because the red states, will define the common good way different than the blue states will.
yeah,
That's so unfortunate.
I completely agree. And I think that more of this conversation, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think more of this conversation will be taking place on illegal trans woman. I think you'll be talking about this. So tune in on AM 950. Check that out. And you got to get the book, Being Ellen, by Ellie Krug. I'm excited to read it, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I hope you'll come back sometime so we can talk more, because, even if we just talk politics, there's so much going on from one day to the next that there's a lot to talk about.
Well, I'm just so grateful that you had me back on, and thanks for sharing about my book and my radio show, Jerome. You are just a lovely, lovely human. And I'm just very grateful for the work that you're doing with your podcast and in the nonprofit world, and just by showing up. I mean, you exude this wonderful sense of compassion for all humans, and I'm just so grateful that you exist.
Oh, thank you, Ellie. I'm glad you exist too.
Thanks.